POV, you're a parent in 1925 Nome, Alaska, a remote village in the upper region of the state, just south of the Arctic zone. A deadly outbreak of diphtheria is ripping through the population of children. If left untreated, this infection can and will turn fatal. The only antidote in town has gone bad, and the nearest resupply is around 675 miles away. This year's winter is the worst on record in 20 years. So needless to say, with planes being a newer invention, they couldn't fly over the vast frozen open land, and the ports, they had already frozen over, so delivery by boat, it wasn't in the cards. With limited choices left, officials chose to use the oldest method of travel in the area: dog sleds. Well, this is exactly what happened when an epidemic ravaged the small community of Nome, sparking the Great Race of Mercy. Around 20 dog teams drove day and night, with around 150 dogs total. However, one man and his lead dog stand above the rest after running 261 miles over frozen ocean, enduring hurricane winds, whiteout conditions, and freezing temperatures that could quickly turn deadly if something went wrong. A story so daring that even Disney made a movie about the team's exploits. Snow Dogs. I'm just kidding, it was Togo. Welcome to the chat, Leon Hart Sapala and his lead dog, Togo.
Must stop the terror. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
It was the middle of a cold January in 1925 when the only doctor in Nome, Dr. Curtis Welch, began to see cases of diphtheria, a serious bacterial infection primarily affecting the nose and throat. This highly contagious bacteria is passed by respiratory droplets, and the telltale signs of it, a gray coating in the tongue and throat. If left untreated, it can leave lifelong nerve damage, and in some cases, it can be fatal. Think of this as a strep throat that can kill you. That summer, Dr. Welch discovered that the town's diphtheria antibiotics had expired, and although he had placed an order to refill them a month prior, the shipment wouldn't arrive before the Alaskan ports froze over for the winter. In December, Dr. Curtis diagnosed a few cases of tonsillitis among the town's children. However, little did the good doc know, these sick kids were just the embers of a wildfire that was sparking just on the horizon. By the middle of January, 2 children had been diagnosed with diphtheria and sadly passed away. Realizing the epidemic was just around the corner, Dr. Welch implemented a quarantine and radioed for emergency supplies. 6 years earlier, over half of the native population in Nome had been decimated by the Spanish flu. Due to the remoteness of their location, there was a limited interactions with outsiders, thus reducing the population's immune system to foreign bacteria. To put it simply, their immune system lacked in comparison to someone living in a larger city. So when the bacteria plagued the town of Nome, the children wouldn't stand a chance without an antibiotic. At the time, planes were a new invention and had yet to fly that far north during winter. Temperatures could range from 50 to 75 below freezing on the ground. And up in the air, however, that would be a different story. The old planes had zero insulation in the high altitudes, so with ground temps being way below freezing and the flight speed being over 100 miles an hour, well, that's a recipe for a disaster, whether it be mechanical or the weather. Something was bound to go wrong. So instead of sending a plane, Governor Bone decided to do things the old-fashioned way: run a Pony Express style relay. However, unlike the Pony Express using horses, these Alaskans, they would use sled dogs. Around 150 of them to be exact. Governor Bone entrusted the life-saving serum to a relay of 20 dog teams. These men were already considered heroes for traveling across the state's interior in the dead of winter, delivering mail and essential supplies to small and remote villages. However, this run north to Nome would be the hardest package delivery any of these mailmen had ever made. A normal trip would take around 30 days to make such a journey, with the quickest anybody traveling across the 674-mile frozen wilderness was about 9 days. However, there's a problem here. Due to the extreme temperatures of the trip, the antibiotics wouldn't make the journey if it lasted longer than 7 days. So I don't know if anybody can do math that well, but 9 is 2 more days longer than 7. They had to cut this 674-mile journey by 2 days. A Norwegian sled dog trainer and musher, Leonhard Sapala, was chosen for the trip from Nome to Nalato and back. He was famous for winning the All-Alaskan Sweepstakes 3 times, which isn't some giant event where they bring a giant cutout of a cardboard check to your front door, but a sled dog race. His Siberian Huskies were led by a dog named Togo. Not Todo, Togo.
Potatoes.
A 48-pound, 12-year-old husky, equally as famous for his intelligence, ability to see danger, and his origin story. Born in 1913, this unlikely hero was the runt of his litter. With a stubborn free spirit, Togo as a pup was simply too much for Leonhard to handle. Togo was a smaller dog, thus he couldn't pull his own weight, let alone the curious, playful pup wasn't too keen on staring at his fellow Fido's ass all day. And in this remote area of the world, there were no house pets. You either earned your dinner, or you didn't. With the free spirit of a puppy, Togo became too much for Leonhard, so he gave the dog to a friend to raise, well, as a house dog. Later that day, though, the canine delinquent jumped through his new home's window, finding his way back to his homestead. Leonhard kind of took that as a sign that, this is Togo's home, even as much of a pain in the ass as he was. Years before the Great Race of Mercy, when Togo was around 8 months old, the mighty pup proved himself as a lead sled dog. Leonhard had been hired to take a client to a recently discovered gold claim, which would be a quick overnight trip for him and his sled team. And unable to deal with Togo's young antics, Leonhard left him in the kennel with strict instructions. Don't let him out. A short while after Leonhard left with his client, Togo broke free from his kennel. However, the dog got his paw caught in the process. A kennel handler noticed the predicament that Togo got himself into, so he went over to free the mischievous pup. Yet before the handler can get too close to Togo, the pup managed to wiggle himself free, running straight towards the direction of the team and Leonhard. Togo followed his canine colleagues through the night, staying unnoticed by Sapala until the next day. Togo continued to make Leonhard's life, hard, trying to play with the other dogs as he worked, along with charging any reindeer he could see. Sapala had no choice but to harness the free-spirited pup. However, Leonhard was a bit surprised to see the young dog had mellowed out almost immediately. As the run ran on, Sapala promoted the young Togo, sending him up the line until he was sharing a lead with the pack-seasoned vet, Rusky. Togo logged 75 miles that day, a feat almost unheard of with such a young, untrained puppy. Sapala called Togo the infant prodigy, stating, "I had found a born leader, something I'd tried to breed for years." A dog he had tried to give away thinking it would amount to nothing would become this man's cherished dog. As the relay started, so did the news, with telegraphs working tirelessly to follow the dog teams with the eyes of the country on the Great Race of Mercy. The plan was for Leonhard and the now-aged veteran Togo to meet with another sled dog team delivering the package in Nenana, Alaska. The first leg of the race was ran by Wild Bill Shannon, being given the 20 pounds of parcel at 9 p.m. January 27th. He departed Nenana almost immediately despite the negative 55-degree temperature. Led by Blackie, Shannon's 9-dog team kicked off the race, braving the harsh winter conditions. As temperatures began to drop even lower, Bill Shannon was forced to jog alongside his sled to keep warm. On a side note, don't do that. You'll create sweat, which will wet your clothes, which will freeze in the cold, which will freeze you. Thanks, Les Stroud. Shannon predictably developed hypothermia. He reached Minto at 3 a.m. with his face blackened from frostbite. He took the time to rest his dogs, and while he sat by the fire, he warmed himself and the precious cargo. He knew that if the life-saving serum stayed frozen for too long, then it would go bad, and this whole ordeal, it would be a bust. The temperatures had dropped at this point from an icy 50 to a blistering negative 62 degrees. After resting for 4 hours, Shannon unharnessed 3 of his dogs that still needed rest: Cub, Jack, and Jet, expecting to retrieve the good boys on his return trip home. However, sadly, the dogs, they wouldn't make it due to their cold injuries. So, setting off with 6 dogs instead of 9, Shannon took off and proceeded with the relay. Wild Bill arrived at his delivery point at 11 a.m. in bad shape. but he was alive. Passing the parcel to Edgar Calland, the race continued. After Calland rewarmed the antibiotics, he took off into the Alaskan wilderness, mushing his dog straight towards Nome. At this point, temperatures had warmed up to a negative 52. Yet even with the slightly warmer weather, if you can even call it that, Calland's hands froze to the sled's handlebars.
Are you okay, boy? Oh no, your nuts frozen to the porch.
As the sled carried the antibiotics closer, more children would be diagnosed with diphtheria, with a fifth death occurring on January 30th. In a response to worsening conditions, Governor Bone decided to speed up the relay, authorizing additional sled riders for Sapala's last leg of the race, including Sapala's colleague Gunnar Kaysen and his dog Balto. The idea was if Sapala met halfway to pick up the antibiotics, doing what 5 drivers did as one team, then there should be a fresh team closer to Nome to meet Sapala, who would take the supplies from him and run it home. Still, Leonhard Sapala and his now 12-year-old Togo were still scheduled for the most dangerous leg of the race, the short cross across the Norton Sound, an inlet of the Bering Sea off the coast of Alaska that freezes during winter. Think ice road truckers. When the 20-pound parcel passed to Charlie Evans at Bishop Mountain on January 30th at 3 a.m., the temperatures were still at a frosty negative 62. Evans relied on his lead dogs to navigate the icy fog of the Yukon River. He knew he may not have been able to see, yet his dogs, they had a keen sense of smell, along with these perky things called satellites, aka ears. He knew he was in good hands. Well, pause. The team followed the edge of the Yukon until it was time to cross the frozen surface. However, Evans made a mistake. One of those mistakes that you only get to make once in life, because you either learn from it or you don't make it home. Where the Yuyutkut River flowed into the Yukon, water had broken through and rushed over the ice. Well, Evans had forgot to put rabbit skins over 2 of the groins of his short-haired mixes, his lead dogs. Both dogs sadly collapsed from frostbite, forcing Evans to put on a harness and pull the sled himself. He arrived at 10 a.m. Sadly, both dogs had passed away by this time. Passing the parcel, it was now up to Tommy Patsy to make the next relay of the journey. Leaving around 30 minutes after warming the serum by the fire, Patsy was off into the Alaskan wilderness. Continuing along the Yukon River until the river cut south, at this point, he veered off the path, taking the trail that crossed to Kaltag Portage, a trail that made its way towards the coast. Here, he met up with an Athabascan native, Jack Nikolai, aka Jack Screw, which is a pretty badass name. Tommy Patsy didn't know yet, but he had just set the fastest speeds of this entire relay, covering 36 miles in 3.5 hours at an average pace of 10 miles an hour. Jack Screw carried the antibiotics the first half of the Portage Pass to Old Woman Cabin, where he would hand over the antibiotics to a man named Victor Anigik of the Inuit village Unalakleek. Victor ran the final stretch of the Kaltag Pass, reaching the shoreline of the Norton Sound on January 31st at 5 a.m., where he passed the parcel of life-saving needle juice to the waiting musher, Miles Goranigan. Seeing a storm brewing on the horizon, Miles chose not to take the shortcut across the frozen ice, instead taking the long way around the frozen ice, adding precious time to the trip, time that they couldn't afford to lose. However, if Miles did cross the frozen ice and the storm left him stranded, well, that means that this mission would have been a waste. So needless to say, this detour had to be done. Departing for his drive at 5:30 a.m., Miles raced across the hills in whiteout snow, with gale force winds driving down the temperatures to negative 70 degrees. Reaching Sharktulik at 3 p.m., there was a problem. No Togo. Leonhard and Togo were nowhere to be seen. When Leonhard Sapala left to make his odyssey, he was scheduled to receive the parcel where Miles had just departed from. However, due to telegraph and phone lines not reaching the remote villages he had just passed, the news of a detour never reached Sapala. Luckily, there was a contingency plan. Henry Ivanov was waiting as a plan B in the village of Shaktoolik. By this time on January 30th, the number of diphtheria cases in Nome had reached 27 people, and at this point, their supply of expired serum was completely gone. Left with nothing, one reporter recounted, "All hope is on these dogs and their heroic drivers." Leonhard and Togo traveled 91 miles after leaving Nome January 27th to January 31st, heading straight into the oncoming storm that Miles was trying to avoid. The temperature when he left Nome was -20. However, the icy frozen ocean of the Norton Sound, along with the hurricane winds, the temperature had dropped down to a bitterly cold -85 degrees. Henry Ivanov's team ran into a herd of caribou, which got his dogs tangled just outside of the village of Shtulik. Still trying to reach the remote village, Leonhard Sapala saw a sled dog team with his driver struggling to gain control of his dogs. Normally, he would have stopped to help a stranded colleague. However, Leonhard knew if he stopped, that would be one more possible kid dying of diphtheria. As Sapala drove past the musher, the man called from a distance, "The serum! The serum! I have it!" The tangled sled team would be that of Henry Ivanov's. By some miracle, the Great Race of Mercy was still on. Sapala cut through the snow, making his way to Ivanov, where he would retrieve the parcel, along with Ivanov telling him about the worsening conditions in Nome. It was dark by the time Leonhard got his team turned around, but with the news from Nome fresh in his mind, he knew there was going to be no stopping. Like a trucker with 2 logbooks and a handful of go-fast pills, he knew there'd be no sleeping on this trip.
You boys like Mexico?
Choosing to drive his team across the 20 miles of open frozen ice of the Norton Sound, the company of canines heroically ran with no cover from the 60-mile-an-hour winds, with the blistering -85-degree cold burning their lungs with each breath. In front of this team was the seasoned vet Togo, leading the charge towards Nome. Sapala's dogs pushed on until 8 p.m. when they reached the sod igloo at the north end of the bay. That day they had traveled 84 miles. However, due to the extreme cold, Sapala had to stop and warm the vials of antibiotics. After the vials were warmed up, the team took off again, racing headfirst into the snow. During the night, winds had broken the ice road that he had planned to mush through, pushing most of the ice out to sea. There was still some ice to run the dogs on, however, it wasn't stable at all, and it wasn't smooth like it should have been. Jagged ice obstacles ran all along their path. Togo, being older and wiser now, chose his path very carefully until they were back on solid ground. After reaching the shore, the team's next checkpoint was to cross the Little McKinley Mountain, a 1,200-foot summit with hills and valleys that made up the trail through it, making this one of the tougher trails for any of the teams to take. Yet Togo kept running, keeping his nose up and eyes forward. After 8 miles of hills, the team had ran up and down a total elevation of 5,000 feet. Sapala and the dogs descended the mountain, reaching their next checkpoint, a roadhouse in Gavalin. Sapala ended his odyssey of 261 miles as he passed the parcel to Charlie Olson on February 1st at 3 p.m. By February 1st, the infection rate had jumped to a staggering 28 kids. And the antibiotics? Well, there was only enough for 30 people. Now it truly was a race against time, because if more people got infected, then they'd need more vials. Yet if they can get there in time, Dr. Curtis Welch, he could cut off the epidemic before it got worse. With the blizzard raging, the wind speeds rose up to 80 miles an hour, and the temperature? -70. Needless to say, hurricane-force winds blew Charlie Olson off the trail multiple times, along with dealing him a severe bout of frostbite. Olson arrived at Bluff on February 1st at 7 p.m., almost dead.
Well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead.
However, he delivered the package to Gunnar Kassan. The new driver, he waited until 10 p.m. for the storm to subside. Yet, it only got worse the longer he waited. Soon, snowdrifts blocked his trail, leaving Gunnar and his team one option: leave before the storm gets worse. Gunnar and Balto traveled through the night, through snowdrifts and over Topcock Mountain. Please don't look for pictures of that mountain. You're not going to find it. You'll just find bears. Lots of bears.
Hey, big boy!
Balto led his team through the whiteout snowstorm, with visibility being so bad that Gunnar could barely see the dog that was harnessed closest to him. The team was 2 miles past Solomon when they crossed Bonanza Flat. While crossing, the winds picked up so bad it flipped the sled, catapulting the contents of the life-saving serum straight into the snow. After searching in the dark on his hands and knees, he did find the container buried in the snow. Luckily, the contents, they fell into the fresh snowpack, cushioning the glass ampule's fall. However, this incident did cause his hands to fall victim to frostbite. Yet they were now back on the trail headed towards Nome. They reached point safety ahead of schedule on February 2nd at 3 a.m. Yet with 25 miles left to get to Nome, Gunner pushed on, arriving on Front Street 2.5 hours later. And by noon that day, the ampules were thawed and ready to distribute. After a combined total of 674 miles in 6 days, the town of Nome, Alaska can breathe a sigh of relief. The death toll from the diphtheria is officially listed as 7 children. However, Dr. Welch estimated 100 victims due to the Inuit population who lives on the outskirts of Nome having a habit of burying their dead without reporting it to officials. All participants in the sled dog teams were given letters of commendation from President Calvin Coolidge, along with each musher receiving a gold medal from H.K. Mulford Company, the company that supplied the life-saving serums. The mayor of Los Angeles even presented Balto with a bone-shaped key to the city. Gunner and his team became celebrities, touring the West Coast, along with starring in a 30-minute movie called Balto's Race to Nome. A statue was even erected by Frederick Roth in New York Central Park to commemorate the race. The Great Race of Mercy helped spur the Airmail Act of 1925, which was signed into law February 2nd. This bill allowed private aviation companies to bid on mail delivery contracts, and as technology improved, so did the airmail. Within a decade of the Great Race, proper airmail routes were established in Alaska. There's an amazing movie called Togo, produced by Disney, that beautifully captures the heroic story of our four-legged hero. Unfortunately, it's not there no more. Disney made some cost cuts to their lineup and decided to remove this fantastic film, and the only place I could find it on was our darling YouTube. Starring William Dafoe, I highly recommend you to check out this movie. It's pretty good for a Disney movie. Now, why didn't I give Balto the same love I gave Togo? Balto did deliver the serum. It's simple. Togo was the real hero of this story. His team ran 200 miles further than any other dog, not to mention their leg of the race was the deadliest. Whether that be the ocean of ice or the extreme cold and the furious winds, Togo never got a parade, he never got a key to the city, he never got a statue in New York. Like a true hero, Togo did his job, he went home, he never looked for glory. As much as a dog could not look for glory. If you agree Togo was the hero of the Great Race of Mercy, then let me know in the comments. It's the easiest way to help my channel, and if you like what you saw, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe. Your engagement is a tribute to the algorithm gods, and those gods help put my channel on the map. Until next time, see you beautiful bastards in the next video.
Must stop the terror. Thank you. Now watch this drive.